It was awesome, and gave me some more time to not think about my Firefly. Yeah, it's got me messed up.
Yeah, it's coming along really well, though. Come on, that's really looking nice.
Yeah, don't f it up.
That's what I'm worried about.
John, you spoke it into existence. Don't do that.
I know he's just messing with me.
Welcome to episode 12 of the Plastic Posse Podcast. We've got another great show for all you Posse members out there. Today, our feature segment's going to be an armor roundtable. TJ and I were joined by an all-star crew of treadheads to discuss tank modeling. Our guests for this were the handsome and talented John Bonanni. Of course, he was our first official guest on the Posse. Armor modeler, all-around good guy JC Osborne. And Neil Stokes, who's a renowned armor builder, author, researcher, and creator of the website 4BO Green. So that was a lot of fun. I think you guys are really going to enjoy that. Doug, TJ, we're an even dozen episodes in. Can you guys believe that?
That's crazy. This is so cool.
Yeah, it is pretty nuts when you think about it.
So what's new with you guys? TJ, what's going on over on the East Coast?
Not a whole lot. Since the last time we recorded. One good thing that happened to me the other day, and I think you might have seen a couple pictures of it, Scott, is I reorganized all my models most of my models on my shelf. Doug, I need to send you the one picture of all my Star Wars kits. I don't know if I sent that to the group chat or not, but I will when we're done because it's pretty impressive. Not as impressive as two perfect grade Millennium Falcons, but I guess it's about as good as you can get.
He does have two, not one, but two of the Fine Molds 172nd scale Slave 1 kits, and those things are rare as hens, Steve.
Oh, how cool is that?
Yeah, I'm really tempted to sell one because they're going for like at minimum $400. That's at minimum. I've seen them for more. That was just yesterday too, so January 15th. And there's actually none available that I could find on eBay of the Boba Fett Slave 1. They had the Jango Fett Slave 1, which is more or less the same kit. But, yeah.
And right now, with Mandalorian Season 2, with Boba Fett and Slave 1 in it, there's going to be a bigger demand for that kit now than there ever was.
Oh, yeah. That's why I'm tempted. But I don't know. I got to, like most modelers, I have a hard time letting go of stuff once I buy it.
Yeah.
It's really hard to find that kit because of the Mandalorian. I did find one and purchased it this week. But a strange thing is one of the guys on Facebook in one of our sci-fi groups found Bandai's release list for 2021. And almost every one of their kits was on that list. But strangely enough, the Boba Fett version of Slave 1 wasn't on that list.
Well, and other than the TIE Advance, Darth Vader's TIE Fighter, there were no TIEs on that list either.
Yeah, very strange. So I'm not really sure.
That bums me out. I want some more TIEs and I want some TIE Interceptors.
Makes me wonder if maybe they're planning on branching out in the licensing and maybe starting like Mandalorian specific kits. Maybe want to use the molds for those. I don't know.
But I mean, I will say this. I absolutely love the Bandai TIE Fighter. It's so good. Just everything about it. It's just a fantastic kit. It's easy to build. It's obviously easy to paint because it's a friggin' TIE Fighter. It's two colors essentially, but that is, I think we've mentioned that before on the podcast. That is, to me, that's like the ultimate palette cleanser build.
Guys, we keep talking about doing a serial build of a TIE Fighter with the three of us. I think over the next couple episodes, let's firm that up and let's do one and post some pictures to the Facebook page. What do you say?
Sounds good to me.
I'd be interested in it. I'm like 99% sure I have at least one. I know I have Darth Vader's tie that I've not built. Well, I've built one, but I sold it. but I'm pretty sure I have one that's unbuilt.
I have one unbuilt tie, and I've got 2 tie strikers.
See, that's one I don't have, not in 72nd scale. I don't think. I have to go look.
That's one that you can still find.
Well, I'll have to pick it up then.
Okay, we wanted to let you know that this episode 12 of the Triple P, is sponsored by Robert Lara, Ian McCauley, and Terry Wilkinson. These 3 posse members all used our new paypal.me link to help us out. Thanks, guys. We really appreciate it. If you're enjoying our podcast and you'd like to help us out, it's really easy. Just go to our website, plasticpossepodcast.buzzsprout.com. There's no www. In the upper right-hand corner, there's a heart icon. You can also access this heart link on any of our podcast episode pages on this site. Just click the little heart and then you can donate any amount you'd like. We really appreciate the help and your support. If you don't want to donate, you can still support the show by taking a few moments leaving us a review on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, or wherever you get your podcasts from. 5-star reviews really help us get the show out to more people who are interested in scale modeling podcasts.
Episode 12 was also sponsored by Goodman Models. Thanks, Anthony, makers of the super sanding blocks. If you don't have a set of these on your bench, you are really missing out. Anthony over there has some blocks headed our way for some prizes that we'll be giving away in future episodes. We're still kind of working on the details on that. So head on over to www.goodmanmodels.com and send Anthony an order. You won't be disappointed. I love mine.
We also want to give a shout out to our fellow scale modeling podcasts. They're all terrific, and each one kind of has their own unique take on the hobby. We have On the Bench down in Australia, and they just released episode 102 featuring us. When we interviewed with them back, I want to say it was in the end of November. It was really fun. Yeah. It's part of a series of special episodes they're doing, so it's a little shorter than usual. So give that a listen. It's good, obviously, because we're on it.
Well, yeah.
Then there's Plastic Model Mojo down in Kentucky. Mike and Dave just released episode 29, I believe, on Friday. I think yesterday, the 15th. And the Scale Model Podcast, Stuart and Friends, they're up to episode 62. And then the newcomers, we have Just Making Conversation. James and Malcolm have already made it to episode 4. And then Model Geeks just released their inaugural episode 1.
You guys heard that Model Geeks podcast yet?
I did. I listened to it.
Yeah, Justin and Scott and those guys, they did a good job. You kind of learn who they are. It sounds like they're, a lot of aircraft builders, had a lot of really good discussion points about their military careers and kind of what inspired them to become aircraft modelers.
And then in the same vein as the podcast, there's some other great content creators that we like to give a shout out to and ask you guys to go check out. We have Sprue Pies with Frets. It's a blog run by Stephen Lee. He's got a pretty good take on the hobby. He's a really nice guy. And yeah, so please check that out. And then we also have Jim Bates, a Scale Canadian TV YouTube channel. You might remember him. He was on our last episode. Also a really good guy.
Yeah, that's a great vlog. And Stephen Lee, he's kind of come out of nowhere, but his Sprue Pies with Frets, I read every one of those. He's a really good writer, and he always has an interesting take on the hobby.
On some business news, this is mostly, I guess, bad news, but I'm sure a lot of listeners are aware that Squadron mail order has closed down, and it seems like they closed down for good. I know they're a pretty big mail order distributor, and I think they also sold modeling products. I'm not too up on them. I never used their website.
Yeah, they were a real pioneer. They were kind of that first generation, so to speak, model distributor, and Sprue Brothers and Andy's Hobby Headquarters and a lot of those guys came later on, and Squadron kind of pioneered that. But I think they've been kind of going away for a while now.
Yeah, anybody that's been modeling for more than 30 years remembers having their Squadron mail order catalogs. You could always get a hold of one of those and order things the old-fashioned way, like mail order, actually fill out a form and send it in to order what you wanted.
Well, in the meantime, we do have some great model distributors here at the Posse. We're kind of partial to our boy Patrick Perales over at Andy's Hobby Headquarters. He always takes care of everyone really, really well. But yeah, it looks like the end of an era. I think JB, John Bonanni, was kind of all over this. He was kind of the one, for the most part, that I saw that kind of broke this on Facebook this last couple of weeks. Well, we've got our T-34-85 group build. That keeps going strong. Haven't had as many people getting their kits across the finish line the last couple of weeks, but a lot of really good in process shots on that, and different members that are joining the group that have started their kits now. TJ, you've kind of dove back into your T3485 this week, haven't you?
I did. I woke up this morning and I went for a run, and when I got back home, I was enjoying some coffee, and I decided to go ahead and pull it back out because I'm working on the Rifle model Firefly, and I kind of let that stew a little bit because I'm trying to figure out kind of where I'm going to go with the weathering. So it's painted and everything. I've started the weathering, but I'm just kind of letting it brew a little bit. And I kind of just wanted something to keep myself busy, and I figured might as well start cracking that thing again. So I made some pretty good progress on it. And it's been really fun. I was saying before we recorded that, man, this is a great little kit. I mean, it really is.
You were going to shave off those fenders and use the photo etch ones, right?
I did. Well, I haven't attached the photo etch fenders yet, but I shaved the plastic fenders off with a tip from Jonathan Anderson, a buddy of ours, and he said to just take your hobby blade and score the fender where it meets the slope of the side armor a couple of times, and then from there, like, because the styrene, you can pretty much snap it off. So I did that. I set it up so I had a nice flat surface and scored it a couple times, and actually I cut all the way through it, and it popped right off. And then you kind of sand down some of the little bits that get stuck on there. And it took me 20 minutes, if that.
Looking forward to that. What's the next step after the fenders?
Well, I got to finish all the hull details. Before we start recording, you got to listen to me sand some road wheels, bane of every armor modeler out there, because, man, they suck. But there's nothing you can do about it. And then I got to do the track. So that'll probably be the next thing. I'm going to do the tracks probably the way John did his. So you can see that in the group build. He's got a nice album of his build, so you can kind of, with notes, so you can kind of follow how he did it, which is pretty much what I'm doing.
Yeah, with the Elmer's glue on the inside set of road wheels, that kind of thing. I need to try that. I haven't done that before. It looks like a pretty good method, so maybe I'll join you there. Well, Doug, I know you've got one of those kits, but I think you've had kind of a bigger project on your bench. What have you been up to this week?
Well, is this my digressions? Because I could digress for a long time about freaking drywall. I tell you what, I never want to sand a model again, because I've been sanding and sanding and sanding drywall seams, and I'll never get over this. I mean, it's a pretty big space that I'm going to be doing in the long run, and oh my gosh, I am not enjoying this.
How's the progress coming though? It looks like you're getting closer, certainly.
Well, it's taking about 3 or 4 times longer than I was hoping. I had it in my head how well this was going to go and how long it was going to take for each part. If I was right, I'd have been done with the 3 rooms I was working on now. I'd have been done a couple weeks ago, but instead it looks like 3-4 weeks out before I can get where I want to be.
Well, it'll be worth it. It's looking really, really good.
I'm pleased with what it looks like so far. I'm just frustrated with the time it's taken.
Yeah, I get that. Any other digressions over from you, Doug?
Wonder Woman 84 sucked. I am so glad I got that for free on HBO Max, because my son pays for HBO Max, and I didn't pay for it in the theater. Oh my gosh. It's a good thing Pedro Pascal wears a helmet in Mandalorian, because ugh.
See, I thought he was like the best part.
I didn't like him, and that's all fine. I just didn't like him in it. I don't know. I'm done. That's my digression. Wonder Woman 84. I mean, watch it if you get a chance. Maybe for some continuity, see what happens there. But yeah.
So 2 thumbs way down from Doug on that one.
Well, one of the thumbs might be about halfway down, because there were a few redeeming parts. I mean, there are some things in there that I enjoyed, but for the most part, I felt like it just was a big disappointment. I mean, after the first one, which was such an amazing movie, to this.
All right. Well, now that Doug has that off of his chest, we've been talking about the T3485 group build for quite a while. Quite a few of the members have their builds done. quite a few other members are getting close. So we're kind of thinking maybe we start considering what our next group build is going to look like. What do you guys think about that? Do we want to do another armor piece? And if we do, what does that look like? Or do we want to do another subject? What do you guys think about that?
I think we branch out to another subject, whether it's aircraft, whether it's sci-fi. It doesn't matter to me. I do sci-fi all the time, and that's enjoyable. Maybe I'd be the one to step back on this one until that basement's finished. I don't have a place to do it.
Yeah, I can see how that makes a lot of sense. What about a Bandai TIE Fighter group build? Expanding what we were talking about a little bit earlier, TJ. What do you think of that?
Yeah, that's not a bad idea. My only concern is I don't know what the availability of that kit is currently, because I know some people are having hard times finding Bandai Star Wars stuff. But I also heard tell of a rumor that a lot of stuff's gone back into production, so they've started production again. So hopefully, it's going to be a little easier to find some of these what used to be ubiquitous kits. So
that's a fun word, ubiquitous.
Ubiquitous.
So I mean, I would say let's go ahead and I don't know, let's take suggestions from our listeners. Send us a message on our Facebook page. Tell us what do you think. The only stipulation that it should probably be is it should be a well-regarded kit that's more or less or brand new, something that's pretty easy to find and kind of simple, and no interior, none of that kind of stuff, no third-party type stuff, just something you can build out of the box to make a good model.
Well, it seems like the posse members have been really, really busy. Looking over here at the mailbag, and it's kind of busting at the seams.
There's been a lot of feedback. So I'll go ahead and just jump right in. From our friend Hector Colon. Hey guys, I've been listening to the show since episode 1 and have to tell you that each episode is better than the last. I wanted to thank you for allowing me to join you guys every other week. All the scale model podcasts have been my virtual hobby clubs. On behalf of the Butch O'Hare Model Club here in Chicago, we would like to send you 3 a token of our appreciation. He wants to send us t-shirts.
Yeah, thanks, Hector.
Very nice. Thanks, Hector. And I have a question, Hector. Are the Blackhawks going to get any better? Because as of this recording, they're 0-2. I realize they're playing the champs, but man, it's frustrating. Anyway, I'll move on. I digress once more.
That's a little bonus digression.
Yep. From our friend Jamie Stokes. Congratulations on a cracker of a New Year's episode. Love the idea of the skill of completing a build. It is a definite skill set. It's about overcoming the dual fears of failure and success. I'd like to say that quantity of builds is good. Striving for quality is good too. As for TJ, stepping up to a bust is a challenge. I'm sharing how my busts and figures have evolved over the years. He sounds like he has the skills, just working out how to adapt to a larger scale is the next step. Thanks, Jamie.
Yeah, thanks.
And I'm sure TJ will be paying close attention to that. Our good friend Ray Davis is feeling better and says, "G'day, Scott, Doug, and TJ. G'day." I think that's how he would have said it. I'm just listening to the last episode, waiting to pick our daughter up from her work. I just heard her shout out and wanted to say thanks very much for the heartfelt gesture. Hey, Scott, try not to spread that rumor around about the nurses. I don't want to get into any trouble and found out by the Minister of Finance, a.k.a. the wife. Okay, he's only joking. Hope you're all doing well as your families. Take care, guys. Hope to talk to you all soon. Thanks, Ray. Really enjoy your feedback.
For those of you out there, Ray has a really, really cool hobby too. He works with balloons, hot air balloons down in Australia where he's from. So it's pretty interesting what he does over there.
Mike Talley is a fan of Dukes and writes to say, I was listening to your newest episode and hear the mention of socks for Christmas. My wonderful wife gave me 2 pair of tank socks. Nice. Oh, tank socks.
Did you say Dukes or Doug's?
Is it Doug's? Is it me? I mean, who's a fan of me?
You've got fans.
Start over. I don't have fans. I don't even think my kids are fans.
Well, they must be fans. They got you a perfect grade Falcon.
They were trying to suck up to me, that's all. All right. Terry Wilkinson contributed to the posse. Much appreciated. He also said just finished episode 11 and TJ and Doug kicked ass. Oh, I can't say ass. Okay, thanks, Terry. Justin Ryan responded to Scott's comment on our Facebook page about painting figures to be a bit of black magic by saying, oh, come on, they aren't that difficult. Like I commented on the Model Geek post. What's the worst that can happen? Gotta strip and repaint? But lots of good video channels on YouTube for tips and techniques. Very, very true. David Brian Bridges said, still trying to get caught up on episodes, but really enjoyed 7 and the discussion about inspiration, a huge part of modeling for me. Keep up the good work, guys. James Skiffins of our sister podcast, Just Making Conversation, sent in this feedback. Great episode, guys. You spoke about how you model and New Year's goals. I just wanted to add my thoughts about how you go about avoiding getting tripped up in your builds and not finishing them. I have the same issue, avoiding builds or steps because I'm afraid of a new technique or not matching the mind's eye of my build. I changed my approach to my builds a while back. Improvements take time and practice. Set a goal of one new thing about every build, a technique too. Thanks from James. Thanks, James.
Thanks, James.
All right, it's time for our main segment, our first ever Plastic Posse Podcast Roundtable. This will be an ongoing series of segments where we bring in multiple guests and discuss a subject or a genre or other topics relating to scale modeling. Today's roundtable is about armor modeling. Features Scott, TJ, John Bonanni, JC Osborne, and Neil Stokes. Enjoy!
Welcome in, everybody, to our Armor Roundtable. We're going to have a treadhead discussion with some of the most interesting guys in the armor modeling realm of our hobby. To start off, we've got Neil Stokes. He's the creator of 4BO Green. He's a longtime armor modeler, big fan of his work. We've got TJ Holler from our podcast, who also is a great armor modeler. We've got John Bonanni. He's been on our show before. You guys have heard from him, and he's a man of many talents, especially in the barbecue area, as well as armor modeling. And we've also got JC Osborne from the West Coast, who's a great armor modeler. With those brief introductions, Neil, introduce yourself to the group.
My name is Neil Stokes. I've been modeling now for probably about a half a century. Started out as building airfix airplane kits as a small child with my dad. Like most kids, did pretty much everything, all the different genres, and sort of settled in on armor modeling. Not really sure why. I think, I just like the dirty, gritty feel of it. So, yeah, mostly build World War II stuff, a little bit of post-war, mostly British and Australian, a little bit of World War I stuff. And I've also been branching out into the Maschinenkrieger sci-fi genre. Again, kind of like the whole sort of, gritty World War II in space kind of feel of that. Some of you may be aware, I've been writing a few books over the last 10 years or so around the World War II Soviet armor space. Sort of accidentally, really, because I started out doing a trumpeter kit, started to do the brag book and do the research that you would do, and sort of forgot to stop. And 550 pages later, I had the big red book of KVs. That was kind of how it started.
A good effort for sure. Maschinenkrieger, I mean, that's something that TJ really likes, and there seems to be a little bit of commonality with armor modelers seem to really relate to Mac kits.
It was funny. I got into that way back in 1985, 86, when the original Nitto kits appeared in Australia. Despite this accent, I grew up in Australia. They were great. I mean, they were multimedia kits. There was obviously a whole lot of background genre there, but this was pre-internet, so we really didn't have a whole idea of what that was all about. But just loved those kits. I actually still have the very first super armor fighting suit that I built back in the mid '80s. It's sitting in my cabinet. Then, of course, when they re-released those kits around about the late 2000s. And then, of course, we had the internet and all sorts of background now started to come out. Yeah, I mean, everybody's been getting into that stuff. It's really cool.
John Bonanni, why don't you go next?
Yeah, thanks, Scott. And thanks, you and TJ for hosting us. It's going to be a fun time. So a little bit of background about me. I think my first armor model, I know what it was. It was Tamiya's Ancient King Tiger. Painted it in an ambush scheme, and I still have it. So maybe I can take a picture and post it. It's pretty wretched, but I think I was about 6 at the time, so you got to give me a little leeway. Since that model, I stepped away like I think all modelers for that matter. I've boomeranged a couple times. So I left modeling till about 2001. A band of brothers came. And I remember the scene, I think it was episode 3, when the Yag Tiger comes over the hedgerow, and I was like, oh, or the Yag Panther, fake Yag Panther comes over the hedgerow. I was like, oh man, I want to build armor models again. And my dad's like, okay, you're 16. You probably aren't that interested. Here's an old Tamiya Yag Tiger that I started. I finished that and kind of fell in love with it and went really hardcore from like 01 to 04 when I was in high school, built a lot of models, went to a lot of model contests, and then college set in, left modeling, got a degree, went to work for the Air Force, and then found my way back into the hobby again. And seriously, probably in the 2012-13 timeframe. And that's, since then I've been really hardcore, started my Facebook page as a way to share my work. I've gotten involved with a lot of not only publishers, but friends around the world. I have armor modeling to thank for all my friends, have the privilege of not only meeting you guys, but everybody on Facebook. So that's kind of my armor modeling saga. And I have no favorites. I'll build almost anything. But that's not true. I do have favorites. It's German tritonal camouflage schemes. I love airbrushing. So, that's me.
JC Osborne.
Yeah, hi. I'm JC Osborne. Is originally from New England, from Rhode Island. I actually grew up there. Spent some time in Massachusetts. Moved to California back in 91. I can remember my first kit. The first kit I ever built, and man, I had to be about 7 or 8 years old. And that's a long time for me, believe me. It was a Renoir Walker Bulldog. I can still remember all the glue marks that were on that thing. And what drove me into armor modeling was my dad was in the 6th Armored Division in World War II. For years, as a kid growing up, his Bronze Star Medal certificate hung on the wall in our apartment. And I was always just totally enamored with that. Dad was a staff sergeant in the 212 Field Artillery, and so he's worked on some tanks. He's worked on a lot of half-tracks and M7s, the Priest. So that influence really kind of, drove me into armor modeling. And, and honestly, one of the other early modeling armor kits was much like John. I had the old Tamiya King Tiger. It was painted with a brush. I don't have it with me now, but yeah. So that was then, and built a little aircraft back in those days, mostly 72nd scale. And then like most people, you kind of, discover other things in the world and you go do something else. Back in the late 90s, I had bought my first airbrush. Probably around 2000, 2001, I actually got a compressor. Before that, I was using, compressed air cans.
So sorry.
I know. Huh? It was painful. Trust me.
The horror.
But when it was a really warm day, the iciness of those cans were just wonderful and refreshing. So then did a lot of aircraft modeling back in the 2000s and up until maybe 2012, 2013. And once I came into SMCG, which had a big influence on my building, pretty much started to focus on armor to where in the last couple of years, it's been my primary focus. It's funny, talking about back in the day, I've got an older boy I'm not going to tell you his age because he's up there, because I'm up there. But I had built him a Tamiya Panzer IV-D, the old kit. And he absolutely cherished that. And even to this day, he still has that. So armor's been around my life quite a bit. And like I say, in the last 4 years, it's really become the main focus. I may build an occasional aircraft kit if I, desire or find the time, but I'm pretty much all armor at this point.
Having that influence from your dad and then passing that on to your son, that's super cool.
Thanks.
TJ, what about you?
Okay, I guess I can talk about myself. Yeah, I've only been modeling for, well, I guess now it's going not 9 years since 2012, and I've only been doing real scale models for, I don't know, last 6 years or so. Really, I started with science fiction and Star Wars, which I still do on occasion, but I would want to say probably 3 or 4 years ago I started building armor. I'm still pretty new to it. I can count all the tanks I've built on one hand, so I'm still trying to figure out what I'm doing. But yeah, I like building tanks. They're fun. And anyone that's listened to our podcast has probably heard me talk about it, but I'm a huge Sherman-holic, I guess.
Yes, you are. Yes, you are. Well, I have a pretty similar path to everybody else. I've been a modeler since I was about 7 or 8 years old. For the last, I don't know, 15 or 20 years, mostly armor, a little sci-fi here and there, but I just love tanks. The last 10 years, and this will kind of lead into where I want to start our discussion here in a second, but armor modeling has really exploded, both in, popularity, but also the offerings, the kits and the products to weather with and everything else. First question, I'm going to throw this to you, John, and then everybody just feel free to jump in on this. In a couple of our recent episodes of the podcast, we've been talking about, is scale modeling an art? And, that balance of when you're building a model that's extremely realistic or maybe has some art in it. John, when you do your modeling, where do you kind of fall in that spectrum, and how do you look at the balance between the two?
Yeah, that's a great question, and it seems to be a hot topic in some corners of Facebook. I certainly think some armor modelers take a very artistic approach, and to be honest, those ones I tend to follow and admire the most. Some examples I would throw out there is Adam Wilder or Meg Jimenez. What they're doing is the Spanish school. And I understand it's not for everyone, but the way that they play with light and different effects, Martin from Night Shift is another prime example, and is probably one of the best in terms of explaining it and illustrating it in video form about the artistic nature of armor modeling. And it's using different techniques to present false shadows, to present more wear. As I sit at my bench and I look at a T-34 in front of me, I'm thinking like, man, I really beat this up. But the only way to convey certain effects, I find, is that you have to overdo them. And in that case, it's very artistic. Another hot topic for artistic nature of armor modeling is Panzer Gray. I like mine a little blue. That is just my personal appeal. I think it brings, it makes the vehicle look more alive in a sense. It brings a hue to it that is not often seen in photographs, because Panzer Gray is very dark. It's just very dark gray. It's almost black in some circumstances. But I think that little blue hue and that artistic approach to armor modeling makes some of the most interesting ones. But I also want to caveat realistic modeling in a sense. And how do I describe that in the best way I can is Mike Rinaldi. When you look at his work, it's extremely realistic. But I also think with that realistic approach, there's an artistic nature in it, if that makes sense. Common phrases I hear with art and I support it is like, you don't know what it is, but you know it when you see it. And I tend to look at armor modelers on the internet, and you can tell when they get it. And when they take that, artistic nature to a build. It's much more than just, paint, wash, dry brush. It's deliberate effects trying to achieve, a forced perspective.
And sometimes it's a sort of a hyper-realism thing, right? In that you're not intending to make something look exactly as it would from that distance. Like you said, John, you're trying to accentuate an effect, and you're trying to make somebody feel it. And in order to do that, sometimes you have to exaggerate the effect a little bit. I mean, people talk a lot, and have been for decades, about scale effect and how you do certain things with colors and so on because of that. To me, thinking of that is you're working with a smaller subject, a smaller object, if you will, in front of you on the bench, on the table, under the lights. And there's not the same amount of light hitting that thing as there would be in a 1-to-1 scale tank. So you've got to do more with that light in order to get the effect that you want.
Yes, I agree.
In my case, I kind of refer, or where I want to go is kind of like artistic realism.
Mm-hmm.
I'll give you an example. Right now, I'm building the T3485 from Right Field Models. Yeah, I could build it out of the box. I could mark it out of the box, and that's nice. But for me, I like to look for reference photographs, and then I'll take those reference photographs and decide, how much of this do I really want to capture? And I'll give you the example here. I have three photographs of tanks, T-3485s in Belgrade in 45. If you look really closely, it's particularly on the right-hand side of the left-hand side of the turrets, you'll see the bulge and you realize it's not the same turret. Short of that, though, the vignette that's there, if you look at those, is amazing. And the way they've laid out stuff on, I mean, they've got a 55-gallon drum on the left-hand side of the tank in the rear, where you'd normally have the other, the normal fuel tank.
Yeah, the 100-liter tanks.
Tied off on the right. And so, to me, I'm like, okay, so I've got a T-3485 that's coming out of, I think it's 174. And I'm going, yeah, you know what? That's great. And if you look really closely, you probably figure out it's not the same tank. It's not the same model. But I really like the way those photographs reference the reality of the scene. And so that's my goal. I'm going to try to replicate as much as I can and use that to create a piece of work.
Mm-hmm. Little modeler's license along the way.
Yep, absolutely.
So are you saying, JC, that you're shooting for realism and you're trying to do it in the most realistic way, or are you going to deploy art, so to speak, to try and get you to that look that you're aiming for?
Like I said, I think I've got either artistic realism or realistic art. Or I don't know. But basically, I think there's an art to being able to replicate what you see in the photograph from a weathering perspective. Because quite honestly, you look at any piece of armor that's just rolling down the road out of the factory, it's already picking up dirt, dust, etc. You put it into a wartime experience and give it, 6 months on the road, man, those things get really, really beat up. So to me, I think the art of this is being able to use the materials we have to replicate what that really looked like. Recently I put up a KV-1 that I had just struggled to finish, and it's not very well done construction-wise in terms of suspension. But on the upper body, if you want to call that artistic, that's fine, but that's the way whitewash wears off a tank. A KV-1, and Neil's obviously the expert on this, but the heavy soda on the exhaust, all of that grunge is realistic, but it's also artistic to be able to replicate that.
That's a good point. And TJ and I were talking about this before the call. John mentioned it with German gray. TJ, what about the use of color as an artistic medium? Do we deploy the color exactly how it looks on the paint chip, or do we alter it? I mean, where do you kind of fit in that spectrum?
Well, I've kind of shifted really over the last couple of years. I was, I guess, as militant as you could get, as making sure my color was as accurate as possible. But as I guess I've gotten older, maybe not necessarily wiser, but I just don't really care anymore. Like I said, I'm a big Sherman fan, so obviously I paint a lot of olive drab. I know what olive drab is supposed to look like. It's pretty well documented now that we have access to the internet. It's out there. I know what it's not as well. So the way I approach it now is trying to find a happy medium between what it actually was and what I actually like to look at. Because at the end of the day, I'm starting to lean more towards the latter and care more about how I think it looks. And this kind of got brought up because I'm working on a Right Field model Firefly, and I went with a distressed paint look like Martin does on his Night Shift channel. I used AK Real Color SCC 15 olive drab, which is not correct. It's not a correct color, and that's fine. I used it because I like the color that it is, and I like spraying AK Real Color. That's my favorite paint to work with. And I posted I think it was a short video clip in Scale Modelers Critique Group, and someone mentioned that little that was either too light. I think, it's too light for SCC 15. I'm like, yeah, I know. And I don't care because it looks good. in the course of discussion, it was brought up, oh, I bet most people don't paint olive drab correct. I responded that it's also true. Most people don't, myself included. And I know I don't, and I don't care.
But also, I mean, the variations in OD between factories, in time periods, even in light conditions, cloudy day versus sunny day, you're going to get the blue overtones, all of that sort of stuff. I mean, there's you got a lot of leeway here. It's not down to do we actually apply some sort of sophisticated instrumentation to this thing. And the other side of it to me is that and particularly with things like the post-war olive drab, which was the darker color, but also Panzer Gray and even 4BO green when it was in bright light. I've seen 35th scale and even 72nd scale models painted to something that was really approximating the original color on the paint chip, and the model turns into a light sink. It becomes so dark. Right. That you can't see the detail that the guy has put into the model, and your eye just sort of doesn't want to look at it. And it's like, okay, to me that detracts from the model. Lighten it up a little bit, and to TJ's point, it might not be right, but you like to look at it, and that's the important thing.
Well, and John, that ties into German gray, right? I mean, the German gray is very, very dark, but if you lighten it up and put a touch of blue into it, it really makes it much more interesting to look at, and then to layer with your modeling, your weather layers.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I want to go back to what TJ said, because it's kind of how I model now. And what he said really resonates with me is like, when I first came into modeling, the boomerang the last time, I was very focused on, accuracy and color plates and making sure that every detail and clasp on a vehicle was like to spec. Now, I've kind of evolved in a sense that I don't get hung up around those little things, and I am much more goal-oriented in finishing the model the way I want to look at it, the way I want to, see it, think about it. I just don't care in a lot of cases. The colors are close enough, and I don't want to, when I say this, I don't want to convey I don't like the other aspect. I completely appreciate a modeler who is going to the nth degree to scratch build something that doesn't even exist and make sure it's down to the millimeter. I respect that wholeheartedly. I guess my modeling style has evolved in that sense where it's good enough for me. And I tell you what, when you post things online, 99.9% of the time, no one else notices, those sacrifices, whether it be in detail or kind of paint accuracy, unless you paint something bright blue that's Panzer Gray, and then that just triggers everyone. But I kind of take TJ's approach now. I like the way certain things look. My olive drabs are certainly lighter than the prototypical. I'm looking at a 4BO vehicle in front of me right now. It's got a little bit cooler of a tone as opposed to more ochre, which is maybe a little warmer, which some paints are. So I just wanted to hit on that, where I find myself completing more models now when I take that approach, as opposed to before when I'm such a stickler around accuracy and even construction in that matter. I like to blitz through builds, and some things you can hide. The IPMS adage, throw a tarp on it if there's a problem. I've done that before. So I guess I'll just close with, I really like what TJ said there in terms of building it how you want it, and just owning it and moving on to more projects.
I want to just interject something about the Panzer Gray discussion. I've been doing a lot of work with it lately. It's a challenge that there's no such thing as a pure black. Absolutely not. Blacks are they're tinted either they could be tinted to a red shade, a blue shade, or a gray shade, or a green shade. To prove this out, all you need to do, and I've done this, is take Tamiya's black, flat black, and then start adding white to it, and then spray it. You're going to find that black has a blue tint to it. Mm-hmm. Take NATO black, go ahead and add a little white to that, and you'll find that's got a greenish tinge to it. So anyone who's going to, that's where I agree with John in terms of, the blue in Panzer Gray. Yeah, I think it's there. And like Neil was saying, under different lighting conditions, that will show up. and there's been so much talked about it. And honestly, to me, I'll give you another anecdote. I had a good friend who just passed away last year. He was 86 years old, and he was born in Germany, and he served in the Hitler Youth and climbed all over these things. Now, you can say, well, is that, his memory could be, this, that, or the other thing. That's fine. But he was adamant about the fact that there was blue in the Panzer Gray, and every single Panzer that he built had a blue tint to it. Mm-hmm. So I think John's position is not only artistically valid, I think it may have some historical value as well. So, for what it's worth, and, obviously we could go down the Panzer Gray rat hole forever, but I think this is all I want to talk about it.
We do so much weathering and layering on the models is, what the model looks like after you're done airbrushing is not what it's going to look like when it's finished. And so how close do you want to be when you're going to be putting, dark coats and light coats and blending coats on top of that?
There are times when I will deliberately over lighten up the tones on the initial spraying that I'm doing, because I know that I'm going to hit it with washes and modulation and whatever term is the trendy one this week. It's going to knock that tone down and darken it once the weathering goes on. And again, you don't want to turn the model into a light sink. So sometimes you have to start with a lighter shade than you're aiming for, because you have to think about the future effects that you're about to add. Scott, I'd like to go back to a point that John made about going and being the stickler for every detail and stuff like that. Because I think a lot of us go through that sort of cycle. We start out, we learn our ropes, we do our due diligence, and as they say in surfing, learn like a grommet, right? You build kits, you build them badly, you learn how to not to get glue all over the thing, and then you sort of progress to a point where, now you're going all out. You'll take that Aber set and you'll use every piece of photo etch on it, and you kind of go nuts. And then you sort of the pendulum swings back a bit, and you realize that life's too short to do a lot of that sort of stuff, without driving yourself insane. And you come to a happy medium whereby, you do the things that matter to you, and you learn when to stop.
That's a great point. That kind of brings me to a question. Aftermarket items on your builds, specifically barrels and tracks. TJ, I'm going to start with you on this one. Are they A, unnecessary? Are they B, optional? Or are they C, mandatory for you on your builds?
I'm going to go with D for that depends. It depends on the kit. Some kits, you're going to want a metal barrel because the barrel's trash. And the amount of work you have to put into it, in my opinion, it's just not worth it. Unless you're, I don't know, that's your thing. You like sanding barrels. I mean, I'm not going to tell you not to, but me personally, that's a hard pass. I hate it. So wherever I can, it's going to be a metal barrel. Some of the newer, kits that come out that have slide molded barrels, they're pretty good. It's still relatively new, but like the Tamiya Valentine, the kit barrel for that 2-pounder is fantastic. And I got a metal barrel and I used it when I built that kit, but I didn't have to. I almost didn't because it was so good. And then tracks, for me, that's usually a must, especially metal tracks. I don't think I did a 1/48 scale T55. I used the plastic link and length tracks for that. But other than that, I think every other tank I've built, I put metal tracks on. I don't think I've done one without them. Definitely not going to use rubber bands. I don't care. Even if it's a Sherman, don't put a rubber band on it. They don't sit right on the sprocket, in my opinion.
I agree. JC, what about you?
I kind of follow TJ's thinking on this. I mean, especially with barrels. If you get an old, and I'm a big Tamiya fan, much like you are, Scott. I mean, you get the old Tamiya kits with the 2-piece barrels, that's trash. I mean, I don't care. I'm not going to spend it like TJ, the amount of time it takes to make those barrels even look close. So those, I would definitely get a metal barrel. The newer stuff, like the Riffield T3485, I'm using the kit barrel. It's fine. It's single piece. It looks great. It's in scale. I built the Tamiya KV1. I'm probably going to build another one. And their kit barrel's fine. So as we move forward in time and slide molding comes into play, I'm more likely not to get a metal barrel because I just don't see the point. Once you cover it with paint, You're not getting any kind of, metallic look to it at all. That's kind of where I stand with with barrels. On tracks, I'm desperately trying to fall in love with metal tracks. I've been on, if there's been one adventure I've been on, it's trying to find, and I've used just about every one of them, the perfect set of tracks, a perfect brand of tracks. Frill model probably gets my vote in most cases, although their T50, there's a T51 Sherman track is just, you got to be a masochist to try to deal with that. It's a metal track with like 4 pieces for each track. That's just crazy. I have used rubber bands way back. I'll admit, hands up, I've used rubber bands in the past. And if they look good and they fit right, okay, that's fine. I don't think I'd use them now because there's other alternatives. I'm not a fan of Lincoln length. They just don't look right. Even when they mold the droop in, it just doesn't work for me. And trying to put those together sometimes can be a real pain in the ass. So I'm looking at now. I've tried Master Club in the past, and those tiny little bolts just drove me out of my mind. I may have to be driven out of my mind some more and go back to those because I haven't tried our model. That's one thing I haven't tried. So that's something that that I might look at. But I've got model casting. Neil mentioned the AFV club tracks, which are just a night. It's funny. I bought a set of AFV tracks going, oh my God, this is great. This is what I was looking for. And then I opened them, look at the instructions. I was like, oh, you got to be an idiot.
Their Sherman tracks are brutal.
They are. Oh my God.
Yeah, particularly the HVSS ones. Yeah.
John, where do you come down on the barrels and tracks thing?
I guess it depends with me as well. And, I think I got to echo both TJ and JC, and I'll use the Ryefield model T34 example. Its barrel is absolutely perfect. It's slide molded. I have a lot of those 3M sanding sponges. What I'll do is I'll take the barrel off, I'll do a little X-Acto scrape on the seam, and then I'll just twist it in my hand for literally about a minute, and it's good to go. So in terms of a basic barrel, I guess you could say, I'm completely fine with the kit part. When you start to get more complex, whether usually with a muzzle brake or if there's a step in it, like a King Tiger barrel, and there's some detail work, even an Abrams barrel is a good, it's got that worm bore evacuator on it. When you start to get those complexities in on a barrel, it's nice to have a turned aluminum barrel. But I will caveat, I'm also a frugal modeler. So if I can't make, at the absolute, last resort, I'll typically buy a barrel. But I've had luck with a lot of kit barrels. In terms of tracks, I guess it depends as well. I'm a huge fan of Lincoln length. I absolutely love them. I'm so happy that kits are coming out with them. I'm looking at the Ryefield model again. Their T34 is just an excellent example of kind of how modeling has evolved in a sense, where I love their Lincoln Link tracks. I think they look good enough for me. I would love to put a set of our model or Frul's on them, but again, I look at the cost. Gosh, Frul models, they're like $50 these days. And by the way, spoiler alert, I saw the announcement from Andy's Hobby headquarters that Frul model is going to cease selling tracks to distributors right now. So not sure about the future of that brand, but there's alternatives. Master Club is one. TJ's work on his Firefly tracks are absolutely gorgeous and makes me want to buy them. There's our model. I've used some of their sets. To be honest, I don't think that they lack a little crispness in comparison to Frul, but in terms of ease of assembly, they're bar none the easiest. I've done sets within 30 to 45 minutes sitting in front of the television, especially when they have the brass pins. If you buy the sets that have the brass pins, probably equivalent to a Frul model set, $40, $50. You can get them directly from China on eBay. I haven't seen any type of hobby shop carry them. If you use the wire ones, that's fine too. What's nice is the molds are new. I've struggled with Frul lately because I had a lot of old sets of Frul and they would go together very well. I bought some new sets of Frul and it's an absolute nightmare. I think I have more drill bits stuck in my finger than I do anywhere else. It's just crazy how, to think about drilling through 1,000 tracks or some godforsaken number. So I've really gone away from Fruls. To be honest, I had them for Panzer IV. I started assembling them and I had to drill every one. And I got through about 7 links. I boxed them up. I threw them on Facebook, sold them. And then I bought a set of our model from eBay and I had change to spare. One last comment about tracks. I love the injection molded ones as well. In fact, I just bought 6 sets last night off of Squadron. They have a fire sale, 70% off, RIP, I think, soon for them. But I got 3 sets of the Panzer IV for like $6 a piece. I got the Ryefield model Panther ones that are one piece, essentially with the pins you just got to put on each end for like $6. So I love injection molded stuff as well. And I have a bunch of model castings. So in short, going back, I take the JC and TJ approach where I open a kit, evaluate it, and then at that point I either go on eBay or stick with what I got in the box.
Neil, where do you come down on this?
Well, I think you probably, very similar to the other gentleman here. I have older kits. Definitely replaced with a barrel. A-barrel are my kind of favorite for that sort of thing. But the newer kits, I've built just recently a Tacom Jagdtiger. I built 1 or 2 of their Panthers. I built AFV Club Centurion. The kit barrels are wonderful. There's no reason to go away from them. Crazily enough, sometimes you have to use the kit barrel because there's no alternative. Before we started the recording here, I was talking about the Airfix 132nd Crusader. There's nothing around apart from the kit barrel for that, which took a little bit of work, but hey, it came up not too badly. For a nearly half-century-year-old kit, that's a pretty darn good kit. In terms of tracks, Master Club are kind of like my new love. I know people go, oh my God, what about the little tiny resin pins? I don't have a problem with the little tiny resin pins. I think I've got a good pair of tweezers with a flat back to the jaw. And I get them. I put the things in. I use the flat section to push them in, and they go together very, very well. Occasionally, you have to drill out a little bit of flash, but for the most part, they're pretty good. I will use them for pretty much any of the Russian stuff I do, most of the German stuff that I do as well. I don't mind the Lincoln length tracks. Some of the trumpeter kits that I've built, the KV1s, I've used their Lincoln length. It's not bad, but the metal tracks certainly improve. And I don't know whether it's just me. It's probably not, but I always seem to get that when you're assembling the Lincoln length and you wrap everything around and you get to the last link, there's a half a link space.
Exactly.
You're not the only one.
And it's a Russian tank that has a 2-piece track.
Yeah. If you're doing that with T-34s, it's like, shoot. You can kind of get away with it. The early KV track is less of a problem because it has the tooth on every link. If you're dealing with the ones that have the alternate teeth, that becomes even more of a problem. Certainly, having the metal tracks tends to get you away from that kind of purgatory.
I generally use metal tracks if I can. I like, besides the aesthetic of the metal track, I really like how robust they are. And I also prefer the weathering of a metal track to the weathering of a plastic track. I found for myself that the preparation of the metal track, getting it clean and completely free from the oil from your fingers and those kind of things makes them a real treat to weather. How do you guys feel about weathering the metal track versus plastic?
I don't really have a problem with them either way in terms of painting and weathering. I think both tend, particularly the newer tracks, I think they tend to go together pretty well, clean up pretty well. I tend to like to get up nose to nose with the thing and go, you know what? If I can see that the mold seam that runs across the center of the track pin head, probably a judge is going to be able to see that in a competition. So, I will go in there with the blade and make sure I scrape them all off. But, that sort of adds to the tedium. But in terms of painting and weathering, I find plastic or metal to be pretty much equally good to work with.
I will probably take a different approach. I would say I love weathering, full model, R model. I find it much more easier than plastic, only because I really enjoy burnishing them. Burnishing I don't use as a color essentially. I use it more as a texture.
A base.
Yeah. So I see a lot of people, use the burnishing as a base color, and I wish I could do that, but I swear I always have those air bubbles where there's bright white metal showing through. And I've tried every trick in the book, and I just can never get them, completely covered with burnishing fluid. So I burnish them, and then I have like honestly a 50-50 red, brown, black mix, Tamiya flat. I'll blast them in, let that dry, and then I just slather pigments all over them. I actually have a box dedicated to weathering tracks because it's just a disaster. It gets everywhere. And then, once that dries, you take your sanding stick, you can swipe and, hit those high points on the track and expose that white metal. And then you can do speckling and, other techniques with enamel, where I think sometimes I get scared with individual tracks because I've heard horror stories where an enamel thinner will make them brittle, especially at those pin joints, and they'll just crumple and fall apart. I've heard Broncos, Panther tracks, and some of their plastics are susceptible to that. I think Martin had a problem with that when he was building his, super heavy Japanese tank, where the enamel crazed and cracked the hull of the vehicle. So I think that, I always get freaked out about that, but I find metal tracks much, much easier.
Yeah, the sanding that you brought up is my favorite part. I mean, when you're cleaning the cleats and the teeth on the track, there's nothing that looks like metal.
Exactly.
And so that's the advantage, I think.
Yeah, you make a good point with that, in that you can rub it back and weather it exactly as the real track is weathered. So there is that advantage for sure.
Yeah, I'd agree with John on this, because I find that with metal tracks, once you put them in the solution, you take them out, you're like halfway there, and then it becomes a matter of maybe a little bit of rust wash, or maybe it's, a little bit of this, a little bit of that. I'll use a fiberglass pen along the track itself if I want to, brighten it up, but it just seems to be easier. I mean, you can make the plastic tracks look great. It's just that you're going to take more time getting there, I think.
That was awesome, you guys. Great discussion. My next question is about armor modeling in general. And my perception is that, when I started kind of what I'll call serious modeling, probably about 20, 25 years ago, the most popular kind of modeling was, at least here in the US, was aircraft modeling. But I definitely see a trend over the last, say, 10 years where I think armor modeling has really become the largest genre. It seems like if you look at number of kits, that armor modeling is really the driving force for quote unquote traditional subjects, excluding, the big trend in science fiction and those kind of things. Interested in your take on that, and then maybe why you guys think that armor modeling has increased in popularity so much over the last 10 years. TJ, why don't you start us?
Well, I know we were talking about that before we started recording, but, I don't know, because I don't know if there's more armor kits now because it's popular, or it's popular because there's more armor kits available. You know what I mean? We're like, which one came first? I mean, I don't really know, because I haven't been doing it that long. So I'm not really the best, observer of it. But yeah, but I will say I have noticed that it's like every book that AK or MiG is putting out, most of them are about armor modeling in some way. At least the ones that I've seen. And I don't know if that's because my intake of scale modeling is a little more filtered, through social media, because that's pretty much where I get all my armor modeling stuff from, and it's pretty much a handful of groups, and I am in a lot of armor modeling groups that focus just on armor modeling. So I'm probably not the best to speak to that, but yeah, I don't know. That's a really good question.
Neil, what do you think?
Again, I'm not necessarily sure whether whether armor is the dominant genre, because like TJ, I see predominantly armor stuff. I mean, I do see a little bit of aircraft things. I belong to some general purpose modeling groups online. I see a lot of sci-fi stuff as well. But it's kind of like you don't know what you don't know. So there could be lots and lots of things out there that I rarely see. But certainly the volume of releases that we're seeing coming out, and even new startup companies popping up, I think generally speaking, this is a very good time to be a modeler. Modeling in general is certainly booming as a hobby, and I think part of that may be because certainly it shows. You get to meet a lot of people who were the Desert Storm and the Operation Iraqi Freedom vets and so on, and they're modeling what they served on, and they're getting a little older now to the point where they're sort of settled in their lives and they want to get into a hobby, and they're going back to it's kind of like living your own glory days, I guess, to a certain extent. We see a lot of folks building modern stuff more than when I first started. It was all World War II, and there was a few post-war stuff that you'd see on tables at shows. Now, the modern genres or modern periods, let's say, are really booming, and I think that's because of a lot of people coming into the hobby who are veterans in their 30s and 40s kind of thing. The younger guys compared to me.
JC, what do you think?
I could see Neil's point. I think he's right. I think some of the, I don't think that armor right now is more popular than aircraft. I think aircraft still probably sells more kits than armor does. However, I think if we had any kind of sales numbers, I would predict that over the last 5 to 10 years, armor modeling has grown significantly. And I think the reason for that, outside of the historical aspects, which I think are true, that you've got all these veterans that have come back, and we've had publications on, Desert Storm, OEF, OIF, all of these campaigns, which drives interest. We've also had think of the companies that have opened up in the last 5 years: Right Field Model, Border, Amusing, May. Let's say before 2010, even all you had to choose from was Tamiya and Trumpeter and Dragon. And we all know what the Dragon experience is like. I'll never forget when I came back into modeling and wanted to do armor back in, I think it was 95 or 96. I go into a local hobby shop, and the first kit, and this guy walks me over and says, "Hey, these are all the armor kits." And the first kit that I bought and brought home was a Dragon Panzer IV Eve that had 1,000 parts. I thought I was going to die. Okay. Talk about overwhelming. Bad place to start. But yeah, I think there's been an incredible increase in popularity. And I think that's probably reflected in all these companies that have opened up to support strictly armor kits. And look at things like, Abrams. Was it Abrams Squad magazine opened up? Tremendously popular. A lot of your modern subjects, I think, are getting a lot more attention. So I think it's grown, definitely. Even looking at some of the folks that come into SMCG now, that I'm seeing more, kind of a steady stream of armor guys coming in. So, yeah, I think it's grown in popularity, most definitely, and you can see that from the number of companies that have opened up and some of the magazines that support them. So, yeah.
I think there are also new markets opening up as well. Like traditionally, it was kind of like Europe and the United States were the places where models were sold. But I know an increasing number of people in places like China and India who are building avidly. A friend of mine was talking to some folks in a model club in Shanghai, and he said they get over 100 people at their monthly meetings. And we were like, wow. There's also a much larger market on that side of the world now for models, both armor and otherwise. And I think that's another reason why we're seeing a lot of these companies popping up, because there's more money to be made now in this space.
What about the role of World of Tanks and War Thunder and games like that?
Oh, huge. I went across to Bovington in 2016 for the 100th anniversary of the tank for Tank Fest, right? There was this massive display. They had people doing World of Tanks seminars. They had about 30 stations set up there for people to actually play the game. They sponsored opening and staffing the conservation center so everybody could go in and look at all the stuff that wasn't on display. Now you think about things like Chieftain's Hatch. Think about all the stuff that they're doing online to actually promote the real world aspects of it, versus the gaming aspects. Hillary Doyle's got real involved with them recently, with helping out with some of the historical stuff. And there are subjects that we have seen in Plastic that I never expected to see. Based upon the popularity of World of Tanks, people have started or your companies have started to issue kits.
Yeah, like we have not one, but 2 new FCM 36 tanks.
Yeah, seriously.
I don't think there's any way that happens without those video games.
I mean, the Object 704, the 152 millimeter on the SPG on the IS-3 chassis. I only built one, and Trumpeter came out with a kit of it. Woohoo!
Yeah, and Dragon has another version with a different gun that's only available in the game, I think.
Yes. In some cases, we had seen that kind of like, oh yeah, we're rather than release the quote unquote real one, we're going to release the game version. But they usually release both as options. So you'll have your 2 guns in the kit. Hey, look, if I have to do a little bit of messing around to make the thing into the prototypical version, I'm happy to do that rather than have to start with some crappy 80s piece of resin that will challenge what's left of my sanity.
John, I know you've got a take on this. What do you think about armor modeling's popularity and maybe some of the correlating causes?
Yeah, I think, and maybe I'm going to take a different approach and talk about maybe my evidence is based on, my attendance at shows. I've been very fortunate to be going to model shows for a very, very long time and see the kind of evolution of what topics are hot and what topics are not. Growing up and even into the early 2000s, when you go to an IPMS show, there's a reason they called it the International Plane Modeling Society, because there's aircraft, hundreds of them scattered all over the table, and the armor categories were, not very well representative. And you have organizations like AMPS popping up, back in the 90s, to cater to that demographic. But as you look, and I wish I could get, there's data out there to prove it, kind of see how those categories have swung in terms of armor. And you can even look at AMPS and the registrations going up recently. But I think if you could point to some key catalysts on why armor modeling has evolved and become extremely popular, I'm going to say that one of the figures that I have admired and really, I believe, changed the game for armor modeling is Miguel Jimenez. I mean, it all goes back, I believe, to the early 2000s when MiG Productions came about, when the Spanish school and that type of publishing was starting to get out in the modeling community. I think it really influenced a lot of people and gained a lot of popularity in the armor modeling crowd. When you look back at his frequently asked questions book, completely changed armor modeling and really was a catalyst that I don't think aircraft modeling had. We went from wash, dry brush, basic paint to bringing in techniques that were like just crazy. And from the early 2000s to now, I think there's just been an explosion in armor modeling. And when you look at some of the most popular videos on YouTube, a lot of them surround armor modeling. I mean, Martin's channel is a perfect example. I keep mentioning him because he just shows what can be possible with armor modeling and the expression, the weathering, all of that, and people love it. And I think that has made it popular. There's so many different camouflage schemes, so many different subjects. And aircraft, I may offend some people. Sometimes they're just dull to me. Silver or ghost gray. I'm sorry.
Ooh, shots fired.
I mean, I have a degree in aerospace engineering. I've been in the aerospace industry my whole career. I have plenty of pilot friends, but man, they just don't sing to me like an armor model. And, yes, I know in warfare, tanks are probably the first to die, but they're still really cool to build.
No, but I think you make a great point, John, because when you're building an aircraft, let's take a look at this. You've got to spend a lot of time on things like filling seams, rescribing panel lines, aligning flight surfaces, aligning landing gear. Whereas on armor, I think the focus is sort of more on the weathering and the aging of something, the finish of the model. And ultimately, it's the finish of your model that makes that model John's and nobody else's, right?
Exactly. Yeah, that's a great point. I think go to a show And you bring up, this is actually a fantastic point, Scott, and it really just didn't hit me till now. Go to a show and look at a table full of aircraft. They kind of all blend into me, blend together for me. A green is a green is a green. When you go to the armor modeling table and you start to look at them, there's very, subtle nuances to completely different styles. And I find that those, how can I say this? Those big changes in style occur most in the armor modeling category. You have your traditionalists, which there's nothing wrong with that. With very well executed models that look factory fresh are appealing to me as well. But, you can go from that to something heavily weathered, and both are believable, and both can, sit on the table and be really well respected in their own right. Where I think on the aircraft side, I tend to think of aircraft as always clean, with exception to several, fantastic modelers, Daniel Zamabard from Spain and a few other aircraft, Steve Hustad and a few more from the States. But typically, they kind of all blend together for me. And maybe that's just my biased nature. When I go to a show, I like the sci-fi table, the diorama table, and the armor table.
When you do see a well-weathered aircraft model, though, it does really pop. I mean, I've seen some really great U.S. naval aircraft done because, those things, you actually stand on the island of a carrier and you look down and you look at the tops of, F-14s and F-18s. They are beat up.
Oh, yeah.
And watching that done well in a model, I think is amazing. And some of the things you see with the Japanese World War II stuff, where they've been sitting out in the sun on some Pacific island, the green's flaking to aluminum underneath, and again, the guys who can do that well, it's like wow, that's a really great effect to do, without making it look ham-fisted. Yeah, to your point, I think most aircraft, people tend to build them clean, but when they don't, to me, that's the ones that really leap out at you.
Oh, I completely agree, and maybe again another biased comment, but I think armor modeling and the extreme weathering, the different styles has been a benefit to the aircraft modelers, where they can adapt them, evolve them to aircraft model.
Think about you've got a Spitfire Mark II that you're modeling from the Battle of Britain, and a lot of those operated off of grass fields. Mm-hmm. So how do you do the appropriate amount of weathering on that to actually represent an aircraft in that scheme and still make it, look like it's well cared for, but also make it look realistic in the environment you're portraying?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because those grass fields were muddy grass fields as well. Remember, it's the UK.
Point that I wanted to make was kind of follows on what John was talking about regarding MiG and AK. They brought the Spanish style to armor building and gave us products that we could make the equipment more quote-unquote realistic in wartime conditions. I also think that because they brought those products on board, that also had an impact on aircraft modeling. Because you look at some of Doug's kits that he's built, okay? He's weathered those amazingly well, and he's using some of the products that MiG or AK's developed. So if you didn't have an ammo and you didn't have an AK, you probably would still be looking at pretty much, factory fresh aircraft.
You bring up a good point, JC, and I got to comment on this. When MiG Productions first brought out their bottled washes and their SIN filters, I was a kind of a naysayer, to be honest. I saw them as a kind of cliche, gimmicky product. And I remember telling my friend, I'm like, man, I don't know if I can ever use something like that. I got my oils, I'm good. Holy crap, 70 bottles later, I'm eating my words every day, where I understand there's a type of armor modeler and modelers in general that want to use, they can use traditional products, oil paints, pastels, and that's fine. But what I think Ammo, MiG, and AK, all of those companies have made achieving those finishes easier by offering these products. Yes, they are a level of convenience, but they're also a persistent, consistent type of product as well. I know when I open that bottle of wash, what type of effects it's going to give me. But I can also use that wash to deliver different kind of effects, whether it's speckling or, fading, thin it a little bit and give it a filter. But, JC, I just want to accentuate the point you made that those products, I think, have really influenced not only armor style, but, advancing a lot of capabilities, or what am I looking for here? The technique of a lot of modelers. It's brought them and has allowed them to learn at an accelerated pace. Otherwise, they would have to kind of mix some things on their own, look at a color wheel. But now it's kind of at their fingertips and readily available.
A lot of people are wary of getting into that whole level of sort of art education where I've got to figure out how to blend 7 different oils to get that effect, or I can reach for the jar on the shelf and I can get it. It's an enabler. It's kind of democratized that level of finish and style and made it kind of available to people rather than just a few who happen to be trained graphic artists kind of thing.
Yeah, that's a really good point. It's interesting when we were speaking with Martin when he was on our show, he brought up the fact that he feels like from the feedback that he receives that a lot of people that watch his night shift videos aren't modelers at all. They just tune in to see what he does and enjoy the videos, maybe from sort of, to go back to where this conversation all started, kind of an artistic point of view.
It's funny. We actually, our local club goes to the local 4-H fair here in Morris County in New Jersey. And it's interesting to that point, the number of people we get coming by and just watching stuff that we're doing. Most of the time, guys build things. A couple of years ago, I took a diorama building setting, and I started out with it on the first day of the fair, just in flat black. And people were coming back over and over again to see what was going on, and building up the various layers of the painting this diorama base. Yeah, I mean, probably 99 out of 100 were not modelers and had no interest in it. But at the same time, they were like, "Wow, that's really artistic. We like seeing what you're doing." We've actually gotten a bunch of members for our club, though, as a result of that. People who have either come to the show or gone, "Hey, my brother-in-law, cousin, whatever, is into this sort of stuff. Can I get the contact details?" And the club's expanded quite a bit.
John, question for you: your favorite armor kit in the last 5 years?
Oh boy, I knew you were going to ask that, and I was like thinking. I'm looking over my case here, and I'm looking at which one I enjoyed the most. And great question. I would have to point to the Tamiya Brumbar. I say it because standard Tamiya, but it was just certainly such a joy to build. No issues, a unique subject. I mean, it's a box on wheels essentially, so it's pretty hideous, but it was just simply a joy to build and no hiccups, totally fun. And yeah, I would say that's the most fun I've had in a while. And certainly too, the finishing of it, putting, a weird dot scheme on it and making it dirty and muddy like it was in the Ardennes. So I will say Tamiya Brumbar.
That's a great choice. It is such a beautiful model you did. JC, same question.
Boy, I'm glad I came second on this. That's a tough one. There's 2 that come to mind. One is, to me, is Stewart, the newer Stewart, the M3. That was a total joy to build and fun to weather and give it that dusty desert look. That was amazing. I would also throw in there, to me, is Tiger One early production that I built probably 3 years ago now. I did a lot of research on that particular kit, and I found the one that attracted me. These were the Tigers that were sent to Kharkov and given. Some went to the ones I did went to Grosstoyshon. I did all of the research on it, and I was able to weather it properly, and I got to use precision ice and snow on the surface to create some snow and ice. And I just think that particular kit was easy to build. I didn't have to deal with Zimmer, and it kind of was an inflection point for my building. My building went a little higher at that point. I think I got a little better with that. So I'd say that kit and the Stewart. And honestly, the KB1 that I just built, if I didn't run into the problem with Lincoln Link, and I had to chop all the wheels off and repin them all, to me has done an amazing job with that kit. I mean, I've never seen so many keyed positions that make it almost foolproof to put, piece 1 to piece 2. So yeah, those are, I would say the two I mentioned, and I'd say the latest KV1 has a lot of potential too.
TJ?
Oh man, like I said, I haven't built. I like to fancy myself an armor modeler, but I really haven't built a whole lot. I was actually just going back and looking at what I've done because I couldn't really remember. And I built 6 tanks in 3 years, so that I've finished. I've built more. Man, that's tough. I will say, I built the Tamiya KV1, and it's awesome. I think I built it like in 2 days. I mean, I flew through it, and it looks great. Yeah, I don't know. I really like the Tamiya Easy 8 Sherman. That kit is just awesome. That's another one. It literally fell together. It's detailed enough to look really good, but then still give you room to increase, the level of detail on it. If I had to pick, that's been my favorite one that I've built for a couple of reasons. But yeah, I guess I'll go with that one.
That's a good choice. Neil, what about you?
Well, my favorite in the last few years, it has to be the Tacom Burger Panther G. I just had a ball building that kit. I did it as one of the options out of the box was the vehicle from Schweres Panzerjäger Abteilung 512, Otto Carius's unit. There's video and a lot of pictures of them in the first company and the headquarters company surrendering to the U.S. Army in Iserlohn in Germany. And you see a bunch of vehicles in the single core video coming down the street towards the square. And that's the vehicle that I built. The kit was an absolute joy. I think the only thing I did on it was I added some Master Club tracks because I'd already built one Tacom Burger Panther. I built their D. And while the tracks weren't bad, they were not as good as the metal ones. So I did that. But that one has to be my all-time favorite. While we're on the subject of the new Tamiya KV1, joy to build. There are a few issues with the kit, though. Scott, you and I talked about this a little while ago. The idlers are way too small, and that's probably the only it's the only error with the kit. What they did with that kit is they put a spring, early summer hull together with a late fall, early winter 1941 turret, so they don't exactly match up. So I'm actually in the process. I've got that kit on the bench at the moment. So I'm kind of post-dating various features of the hull and replacing the idlers with trumpeter ones to kind of match it up for the vehicle that's on the box art.
That's good information. I look forward to seeing that.
That was just me being the KV geek there.
No, that's totally awesome. I'm going to go with an unusual one. It's a Tamiya kit, which isn't unusual for me, but it's the Samwa S35. And, the kit actually had a few issues and a couple of really, really bad engineering choices that are atypical Tamiya. But overall, it was a Tamiya kit. It was fun to build. And I just love that tank so much that I just, like you guys said on your summaries, I had a blast building it. And I did mine as a repatriated tank that was in North Africa. It was taken over by the Vichy French, and then towards the end of the conflict, it became an Allied tank again. So had kind of a spotted history. So that was a lot of fun. Well, next question, I'm going to open it up a little bit more, and I'm going to ask each of you if there is a specific armor kit that either they don't make or they make a lousy version of that you'd like, or a particular aftermarket item or something like that you wish that we had. John, I'll start with you.
Oh, man, I'm going to give you the lamest answer in the world. I honestly am completely satisfied. I swear to you, we live in the golden age of modeling. And when I think of a kit that needs to be produced, they come out with like 2 of them within the next 6 months. So I am just floored at the number of kits that are coming out, the subject matter that's coming out, the quality of kits that are coming out. It's just simply fantastic. If I did have to pick one, I'll pick a German vehicle, and it's about as ugly as they come. It's a super unique, like Panzer Mark III kind of mine vehicle. It's got this chassis that's been lifted, like it's out of it needs to be rolling on dubs because it's sitting so high. But it's such a unique vehicle. I don't know the name of it off the top of my head, but probably Neil does because he's an armor expert.
I can visualize it in my head. I know the one you're talking about, but I can't remember the name of it. But yeah, it's certainly, like you said, it's all like raised up. It's the pimp my Panzer.
Yeah,
kind of,
exactly,
look, right?
exactly. So I think when I look at subject matter, maybe that's a unique piece. But otherwise, I have just been floored by the stuff that's coming out. I mean, an example is, Border Models is coming out with a new mobile wagon. I mean, it's really crazy. So I'm just along for the ride. So I'm again, lame answer. I know. I'm sorry.
It's all right. Neil, what about you?
Well, I'm going to give you an answer way out of left field. The one that I would really like to see is an Australian M1A1 Abrams.
That's a good call.
Because it's a combination of M1A1 and M1A2 features, plus some unique kind of Aussie things, like they have a fridge on the bustle rack, which is very Australian because you got to carry your beer. But those sorts of things. Now there were a couple of aftermarket sets that were out, both of which are like hen's teeth now to try to find. I have I think it's one of the Riffield Models kits that everybody said, oh, that's the closest to it, but you need to do some additional things. So if somebody was to come out with an Aussie version, just one of the additional kits with another sprue, please, that would make my day, because one of the few post-war things I do is Australian stuff.
JC?
I would hand over my wallet for a decent Cromwell. The only Cromwell we have available which is not bad, don't get me wrong, but it's old and long in the tooth, but I'd like to see a new Cromwell.
I'll second that.
Yeah, but a third that.
Airfix is supposed to be bringing one out, but it hasn't arrived yet.
Yeah, that's great.
So much enthusiasm.
Yeah.
Sounds like you're not much of an Airfix armor guy.
I would say I'm not much of an Airfix guy, no.
Now all the Brits are going to hate you now.
Yeah, I know. They already do, probably. It's okay. For God's sakes, I'm talking about a really good Cromwell. And along those lines, I'd like to see a really nice Comet come out as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that'd be nice.
Yeah.
Those
Comet
two,
for sure.
And I'm speaking this now because I'm going to try to speak it into existence. Borders come out with they're producing a Crusader, which is very overdue.
Thank you. Yeah,
I absolutely agree.
I'm hoping they come out with a Mark I and or a Mark II as well, because while I like the 3, I think the 1 and the 2 are weirder looking with that little turret.
They are.
Yeah, that big machine gun turret is super cool.
And then I think they've got an anti-aircraft version too. That I think Tamiya did in 148.
Yeah, and Italeri did one of the 2 versions of that. Well, actually, there were 3 anti-aircraft variants on the Crusader. Italeri did one of them, but would be really nice to see a modern state-of-the-art version.
Mm.
That's a good choice, JC. It sounds like you're a fellow cruiser tank fan, and that's pretty cool.
I want to do a Cromwell because in Korea there was one Cromwell that was passed around like a joint at a Willie Nelson concert. This thing,
yes,
it was from the Recce Troop of the headquarters company of 8th King's Royal Irish Hussars. It was captured at the Battle of Happy Valley by the North Koreans. It was used by them for a bit. Then the South Koreans captured it and they used it, and then eventually handed it back to the Brits. So this thing went all around the circles. I've got photos of it with a North Korean crew that's still with the British markings on it. I've got photos of it in South Korean service with the South Korean Marine markings on it. So it would be just a really cool vehicle to build.
A joint at a Willie Nelson concert. That is good stuff. TJ, what about you?
I'm kind of 2 minds with this. I agree with John where, almost anything you want is out there. And I'm very happy with with what's available because it fits my interest. Except, so my caveat would be, it's not even, I guess, technically a tank. Well, I guess it is. It's the tank. I want a 1/35th scale Little Willie. Why no one's made that yet? I don't know, because there's lots of World War One tanks available. To me, it would make sense to make Little Willie. I mean, it's the tank. It's the tank that birthed all other tanks,
and he's right there.
Yeah, it exists, so you can go measure it.
It's spinning on a car turntable in the Hall of Tanks in Bovington.
And would it be simple? Yeah, because there's not a whole lot to it. I mean, it didn't even have guns. But yeah, I would love to, because I am a big World War One tank fan. I mean, I'm interested in World War One in general, but I specifically like World War One armor, and I've done not quite a few, but I've done a couple. And yeah, I would love to add a Little Willie to my collection. And at the same time, there's another, again, not actually a tank, it's a self-propelled gun, but the gun carrier Mark I from World War One, which is the first self-propelled gun. It's so cool looking, with the got like I think a 6-inch howitzer on it or something, just something ridiculous. It's really cool. I would love to see a kit of that. That one probably won't happen. I would see a Little Willie happening at some time, and I would have thought they would have already done that with the centennial passing, but I guess a girl can dream.
Is the Whippet based off of it? Because there's a lot of good Whippets out there, right?
Well, kind of,
okay.
Because pretty much every British tank is based more or less off Little Willie. Like, you can see the resemblance in everything, but yeah, especially with the Whippet, with the tracks, very much so. But there's yeah.
A lot of hacking would be required.
Oh yeah. I mean, I guess it could theoretically be done, but there are. I mean, I've built the TACOM Whippet, and I loved it. That was actually the first tank I ever built, and I have the Mang Whippet that I've not built yet, that I want to build because I've heard it's really good. Except for the tracks, I heard the Mang tracks aren't that great.
Well, you guys talked about the new Crusader, which I have 2 on order, so I'm super happy about that, and I'll echo what Neil said. Hopefully we'll get a Mark I or a Mark II earlier version of that. So in 1/35th scale, I'm just keep hoping that Mini Art in particular, but somebody will do some actually accurate T-34 76 tanks. Each of the Dragon kits sort of had good parts about them, but they also all had, flaws. So it'd be really, really nice to see a number of those kitted correctly. And then in 1/16 scale, I keep scratching my head as to why nobody has done a Willys Jeep in that scale. And then how cool would it be to get some 1/16 scale motorcycles, a Harley Davidson, an Indian, some of the German bikes as well. That'd be really awesome.
I'd like to make one comment, and this goes back to John's point way back at the start about, friends made through modeling. Because when I came to the Northeast U.S., I moved up here from Sydney, Australia. I knew nobody. A little while after I got here, I bumped into a good friend of mine whose family has since kind of adopted me. And hi, George, you know who you are. I think now probably 3/4 of my, what I'll call real world friends started through modeling contacts. And it's not just due to people here in the Northeast U.S., but I got like real friends all over the world that have come about since I got involved in this hobby. I'd just be interested in other people's opinions. I mean, John, you said kind of the same thing. What do the others think?
I don't think there's any question that this hobby community that we're in, especially with the advent of social media, really facilitates relationships and friendships. TJ and I have been friends for several years. We've never met each other in person. And the first time we actually talked on the phone was when my crazy ass called him and said, "Hey man, let's make a podcast." So I would agree with that. And, getting to know, John and JC and Neil, now you, I mean, it's tremendous. I've been able to talk with Uncle Night Shift. I've been able to talk to a lot of my modeling heroes. When John made that model that he was referring to earlier, that Brumbar, I mean, that just blew my mind when I saw that. And, I've been able to talk to the guy that did that. I agree, Neil. That's, this community is fantastic. And that's what this podcast is kind of all about.
Yeah, I wouldn't know any of you guys if it weren't for social media. There's no way. How would I have ever known and met any of you? It's such a powerful force for getting to meet people and share ideas. Yeah, I think social media for me. In fact, it's funny, when I first moved out here to California, outside of a local hobby shop with two old guys who would teach you how to do stuff, there was nothing. There was the nearest IPMS, I think, was in Los Angeles or even south of Los Angeles. So there really wasn't much here. But when social media hit, yeah, that's really a game changer for me.
Yeah, I mean, like Scott was saying, him and I became friends over models. I mean, and then we started a freaking podcast together, which is crazy. And here I am, how long have we been doing this, Scott? 3 months? 4 months? Something like that?
Since August, however many that is.
And we've been friends since 2017, something like that. So going on 4 years, and I've got to meet, I guess you would call it, or speak at least with a lot of modelers that I look up to, which is awesome. And the fact that, and anyone that listened to our first episode, and I'm sure John will probably remember when he came on the show, I made a point to tell him that I was like fangirling over having him on the show because I knew who he was before all of this and had followed his work and was heavily inspired by it. And here I get to talk to him and have since then continued to speak with him. And the fact that that's happened to me is just, I mean, it's invaluable.
Yeah, I would, echo that. Some of my best friends are armor modelers, and I kind of have, two quick stories about, armor modeling and introducing me to people that I would have probably not known otherwise. One is my neighbor, 5 houses down from me. There's a guy, he's an armor nut just like us. And the way we met, we were at, we just moved into a new development and built a house, and they had a Christmas party, and I wore my ugly sweater that had a hurricane on it. And that I got over at the Imperial War Museum. And his wife, she didn't know me. She's like, "Oh, you like airplanes?" I'm like, "Yeah, I like airplanes." So she's like, "Oh, my husband likes airplanes. You need to talk to him." I'm like, "Oh God, what are we gonna do?" So he's like, "Oh, it's like two people feeling each other out on the first date." And one thing led to another. And I was in his basement, and I know that sounds crazy, but we really bonded. And he's like, "Oh, I actually like tanks." I'm like, "I like tanks too." He's like, "Well, do you build armor models?" I'm like, "Yeah." "Do you?" He's like, "Yeah." I'm like, "Do you really build armor models? Because I'm obsessed." And he's like, "No, I have to." He's like, and he pulls up his website. He's got like all this work, and I knew he was legit when he's like, "Yeah, I have Duel in the Mist copy 1." And for those who don't know, Duel in the Mist, it was a series on the Battle of the Bulge, and the first segment of it, Duel in the Mist #1, is one of the most sought after books in all of, I think, either armor modeling or armor historians. It was ran by AFV Modeler, one print, and it's gone. And if you see it on Amazon, it's like $4,000 they listed for. It's like crazy, but he had it, and I was like, okay, this guy can be my friend. He's at my level, our level, actually.
Hey, John, I have to interject on that because when you talked about Duel in the Mists, the first edition of that, when I was writing the Big Red Book, I was going after photographs on eBay and eBay Germany. I got beaten out on an auction by this guy, so I shot him a message. I'm like, hey, maybe we can work a deal, licensing thing, and so on. And he's like, "Well, I'm actually part of this group that's doing research on all sorts of World War II stuff. We kind of got this deal where if you donate a photograph from your collection, we'll let you use one of ours." And I said, "Oh, well, that sounds like a good idea." He said, "Yeah, well, the problem is I'm in Belgium." And I said, "Okay, I'll see you Saturday." And so I got on a plane and flew to Belgium. And that was Stefan de Meyer, who was one of the authors of the and he and I became very fast friends. He ran a hobby shop in Belgium, And I think I got there at 9 o'clock in the morning. I left at midnight, very drunk. We were best friends ever since, until unfortunately he passed a couple of years ago.
You know, you bring up a good point, and I had a similar occurrence. You know, there's a hobby shop. It used to be Hornet Hobbies in Toronto, Canada. And I was up there with a buddy probably about 7 years ago, and we go into this shop, and we're there probably about half an hour before it closes. And we had to pick between Wings and Wheels and Hornet. And we're like, let's go to Hornet. And we go into the hobby shop, and immediately I see Mike Rinaldi's Stug 3 sitting in the display case, unmistakable. And I'm like, whoa, what is this? What is this place? And, you know, I struck up a conversation with the owner. His name's Dave, extremely nice guy. And, you know, he took us to dinner. Afterwards, we went, you know, into his man cave in the basement underneath the hobby shop. And he had work from Shep Payne, Harvey Lowe, Tony Bell, you know, Mike Rinaldi's, not only his Stug 3, but his Pershing there. And that, I use that as an example because I've found that, you know, not only armor modelers, but modelers in general are extremely kind people. And as we've been talking about, it's like, you don't know them, but you know them. And you start talking to them, and you become like best friends almost instantaneously, like stepbrothers. Did we just become best friends? Yes, we did. And that's the thing I think that modeling and maybe armor modeling has given me the most, just kind of echoing that point. And curious if anybody else, you know, Neil shared his example, you know, JC or TJ. Or not, you could ghost me, that's fine.
I think my only experience with anyone, you know, of name in the hobby was back in the 2000s. I was on the MIG forums and didn't meet people personally, but man, I mean, Adam Wilder was there, Mike Rinaldi was there, some of the, you know, the European builders were there. That was a pretty awesome forum for armor.
You know, I think this group here today, honestly, you know, I was telling Neil I was fanboying a little bit, to use TJ's term, with Neil, just telling him, you know, look, for years I've been following 4BO Green and your modeling. I'm such a big fan. You know, when we were putting together episode 1 of the podcast, I messaged John and said, would you mind coming on? And he didn't even hesitate. He just came on. He didn't know who I was. I could have been the biggest goober ever. And, you know, JC, you know, I asked him to come on here today, and no hesitation. I mean, this community, this is what it's all about. Man, this has been a lot of fun. This is definitely not the last time that we're going to get some treadheads together to discuss armor modeling. Thank you, everybody. I don't want to keep you all day. Leave some of your day for everything else, but thank you so much for participating. This was a lot of fun. Neil, thank you very much for coming on.
You're most welcome.
JC, thanks for hopping on the call with us and participating.
Hey, thank you very much for inviting me. This has been a blast.
JB, original Posse Man, episode 1 guy, thank you as always for coming on.
It's always a pleasure, never a chore.
TJ, my man, as always, thank you so much for participating.
Hey, I had to be here.
That's right.
Let me just add my thanks. This has been a lot of fun, you know, to all you guys. I really appreciate the invitation. This has been great.
And Neil, just as an aside, talk about fanboying. When Scott told me that Neil Stokes was going to be on, I was like, wait a minute. I looked over on my shelf and I'm like, I've got the Red KV book. This guy's going to be on? You're going to be kidding me. It was amazing.
Just don't drop the book on your foot. Yeah.
No, I know.
Well, thanks again, guys, and you have a great day, and we'll talk with you all hopefully sooner rather than later.
Sounds good.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Cheers.
Thanks, guys. I hope you enjoyed our first roundtable discussion, and we look forward to bringing more of these discussion groups into future episodes. This first one we had was a great discussion. We had a lot of fun with John, JC, and Neil, so hopefully everyone enjoyed that too.
Thanks, TJ. Well, guys, I think that's about it for episode 12. Thanks so much, as always, for listening, and very special thanks go to our roundtable guests, to Anthony Goodman from Goodman Models for his support of the show, to Ian, Terry, and Robert for donating to help the podcast. We really appreciate that to offset our hosting costs. Thanks again, guys. So next time, coming up for episode 13, stay tuned to our Facebook page as we'll be announcing our next very special guest over the next few days. We are really excited about this, and we know you will be too.
Super, super excited.
It's going to be amazing. You guys are going to love that. Until next time, to all those out there in the posse, and especially to you two guys, Doug and TJ, have a great couple weeks, and we'll all talk again soon.
Bye-bye.
Have a good one.